There are too many secondhand books everywhere. We're surrounded by little free libraries or other book swap situations that are filled with books that no one wants to read because people tend to take a lot of the popular or interesting stuff for themselves. We are surrounded by thrift stores, op shops, charity stores, whatever you want to call them, that are filled to the brim with books, of which many of them people don't want to buy. We have houses that are filled with books, or if it's not us, it's our relatives that have houses full of books that they've collected over a lifetime, and maybe they're trying to actually downsize and get rid of some of them, but can't shift those books. On the internet, for example, even here on YouTube, you see videos of people constantly unhauling from their vast collections of books. And I have spoken before in a previous video about the fact that I've unhauled books before, and I actually personally regretted it for my use case. But that does not, contradict the fact that lots of people are unhauling or trying to get rid of books. And often they have good reasons for it. I'm not going to argue against that. The problem is, when it comes to books, particularly secondhand books, we have too many of them in the world right now. And obviously I'm speaking at this from a primarily English-speaking perspective. I don't read literature in other languages because I am not fluent enough in any other language besides English in order to be able to engage. That's on me. That's my problem. It is very apparent that in the English-speaking world, there are too many books. Too many books. We're going to have to do something drastic about this if we're going to actually do anything to fix this problem. Because at the rate at which people are acquiring new books, there's no way that all of the secondhand books that currently exist in the world are going to be read, loved, utilized in a home. It's physically impossible. The number of books that get produced vastly outpaces the number of times those books will get read or the number of people that are interested in those books. And it's impossible to slow down the production rate of new books. Because even if you got the big publishers under wraps somehow and got them to stop releasing new print books, which is highly unlikely because that's how they make money, you have all of the independent and self-published books that get released into the world. Good luck trying to put a stop on that. And so we just have more and more and more and more and more books piling up on top of a massive pile of books that already exists. And you might think, well, reselling exists. There are so many platforms that exist to resell and to give books a new home. And you are correct. But for a very brief time, I worked behind the scenes of an op shop. I saw how much stuff they get and how much stuff lays in a back room unsold. Not just with books. This is a problem with secondhand goods across multiple industries, but books are a particularly difficult one because so many books come in, and because they're still kind of in good condition, or they're at least somewhat intact, they get taken in, but they don't sell. Books that are older and are therefore, yellowed, or they have fading pages, or maybe they've got rips to the pages, or they're those mass market paperbacks which get kind of warped in the spine over time. I know that there are a contingent of readers who actually really go for this sort of thing, and they prefer books in this kind of condition or in this kind of format. And I actually like that there are people that prefer these books, but the truth is, that is a minority. A lot of people are just not interested in those sorts of books. And if given the option between a nice, kind of very clean, almost brand new looking copy of a secondhand book, or one that's beat up and battered a little bit, a lot of times people will go with the cleaner copy unless there's some kind of compelling aspect like a different edition or a different cover or something else that really warrants people getting the older copy. For example, certain books which are known to have like different editions, like the Harry Potter series, for example, that have different kinds of covers and different sort of hardcover versus paperback editions and stuff like that. It has, some appeal, especially because Harry Potter still has a lot of dedicated fans of that series, that yeah, there probably is still a market for different kinds of editions of those books that people would be willing to look down and hunt for. But a lot of books are not in that category. And a lot of the books that end up filling the shelves of little free libraries and secondhand shops, or even ones that are, left unsold on online marketplaces like, Facebook Marketplace, eBay, or I know in the US you've got Pango Books. A lot of those secondhand books are things that are going to be more niche, or things that are just in a condition that most people aren't going to be interested in. And so there's just all of these books sitting, waiting, hoping, and left untouched. And it's honestly sad, in a way, but unfortunately there is not much that can really be done about it with the rate of new books being produced. And no matter how hard you try, you're not going to be able to change people's behavior in order to be able to get people to suddenly adopt and take home all of these unwanted secondhand books. Physically impossible. You're not going to do that. So that leaves a pretty drastic option. I think we're going to have to destroy a lot of secondhand books. And I say that knowing that you watching this video might feel a physical reaction to that, because book destruction emotionally hits on quite a few very difficult areas. I'm not saying I enjoy the concept of it, but when we think about the destruction of books, we think about censorship. We conjure up images of like Fahrenheit 451 and book burnings. We think about suppressing ideas. We have all of these emotional concepts tied up in a book. And we think we cannot destroy this artifact. Like, we have to preserve it. And so it feels kind of wrong to say we should be destroying books. Because aren't we destroying knowledge? Aren't we destroying stories? If we lived in a different world, I would agree with you, but we don't. The sad truth of the matter is that a lot of stories and knowledge exist in forms whereby, there are lots of copies of them. There are many copies released of a book. There are often digital editions. And I'm not saying we get rid of all of them, obviously. But if, for example, if you own a battered paperback copy of Twilight by Stephanie Meyer, a book which we know for certain there are millions of copies of, they're printing new versions of it. They were printing new editions last year to celebrate some anniversary or something, which I saw. This is a book that is still being produced in physical form. And there are so many copies of it that if you, individual at home, decide this battered copy of Twilight, I can afford for it to go in the bin, and, I can move on with my life, ultimately that's not going to actually cause that much harm in the grand scheme of things. Is it a waste of resources? 100%. Is it sad? Yes, 100%. I personally love physical books, and I don't like the idea of throwing physical books in the bin, especially if I pay money for them. I would feel really bad. It would feel like I'm throwing money in the bin. I'm very aware of that. But also, when I talk about needing probably to destroy a whole bunch of secondhand books, I'm not necessarily calling for you, listener at home, to be destroying your secondhand books, exactly. But if we want to clear up room on those secondhand bookshelves in the stores, in the little free libraries, that's gonna be our only option, I'm afraid. Sometimes hard decisions have to be made. And if we want to continue living in the world that we are in, whereby we have so much privileged access to new stuff being created constantly, some decisions have consequences. At the end of the day, if you don't want the old stuff, then we'll have to let it go. And you might think I'm being harsh and careless with that mentality, but I'm actually not. Because we've already, as a society, been doing that, and you maybe just haven't thought about it. I've been talking predominantly with like fiction books or sort of popular non-fiction books in mind when I've been talking in this video so far. But let me turn your attention to another area of books that you may not have had in your mind until I bring it up. Textbooks. If you're watching this video, there is a statistical likelihood that you have at least encountered a textbook sometime in your life. For demonstration purposes, I have an old edition of Kaplan and Sadek's Pocket Handbook of Clinical Psychiatry. Why do I own this? Don't ask, it's a long story. But this is very much an old edition. This is outdated. It still refers to the DSM-4, not the DSM-5, which is the current clinical standard. It's got staining on the pages, right? I assume it was from coffee. I don't know. It was like this when I acquired it. And I'm looking at the price tag on the back. That is close to $80. We're talking Australian dollars here. That someone paid at some point in time, and now that book is worthless because the information in it is considered outdated. There have been subsequent updates to the field of psychiatry since that book came out. And we already have some understanding that textbooks are a thing that become worthless and are disposed of. Because they're really expensive, people do try and sell them on to recoup some of their money back, but there's only so far you can actually do that. It's very difficult if you're the sort of person that actually owns a whole lot of textbooks which were bought new and you paid brand new prices for them, only to find that it's become worthless. And so sometimes you've just got to destroy them. Sometimes you've just got to throw them out because there's new stuff that is more accurate. And I'm not even getting into the side of textbooks, which is now digital, because so many people get their textbooks digital now. Or, you know, if you're a typical undergraduate university student, you may just be relying on PDFs supplied by your lecturer at this point. You may not even be acquiring full books anymore, for all I know. That's at least where things were going when I was doing university, just PDFs from the lecturer. So, same thing applies to our beloved fiction and non-fiction books to a certain extent. Things get old, things get outdated, things become functionally worthless to people, and when that happens, sometimes you have to get rid of them. And if this still makes you very uncomfortable, the idea of getting rid of books, if you still feel like this is destructive, violating uncomfortable Ron in some way, then the question I ask you is, why aren't you rehoming those books? Now, if you are already actively acquiring and reading battered, unwanted secondhand books, okay, I don't have a problem with that. It looks like then you are actually practicing the values that you preach. But if you are sitting there with your collection of books that you've acquired through bookstores, through Amazon, through other online sellers, all brand new and crisp, if you're sitting there with your books collection that primarily consists of new releases or consists of books that got popular on TikTok or something, and you feel perturbed because a battered paperback from the 90s is going to get destroyed because you didn't want it, I'm really sorry to inform you, but that is the consequence of your decisions. I do not say this to be mean. I say it because it's true. And so, if you want to stop that from happening, I think you know what to do. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate the time that you have given me with listening to my, hot take. And until next time, happy reading.